The year was 1984. Ghostbusters, Beverly Hills Cop, and Gremlins had us all packing into the theaters.
All right, when Doves Cry by Prince ruled the radio.
A gallon of milk cost $1.16.
And in October of 1984, this is what we were watching on the news then.
Our first story takes place in the Bronx, where an attempted eviction ended with a 66-year-old woman getting shot dead by a police officer.
But the facts we have at hand now seem to indicate that the shooting of Miss Bumpers by emergency service police officer was justified. However, there will be a continued investigation by the Bronx District Attorney's Office, and also there will be a grand jury hearing into this matter.
Ms. Eleanor Bumpers had been living in the Sedgwick houses in the West Bronx for almost 2 years. This morning, during the course of an eviction, she was killed. She had not been paying her rent from when?
She owed 4 months from July 1st.
And what was her rent?
$98.85. $96.85.
$96.85. And how much had she owed? 4 months?
4 months.
Police say that she threatened them with a knife or lunged at them with a knife. Do you think that that mean that the cop had to act in self-defense in any way?
These neighbors, a man and a woman who live in separate apartments, witnessed today's events. When we asked them to recreate what happened this morning, the man said, quote, "I could see completely the lady's apartment. She told them, 'I'm not coming out.' She said, 'You got to come and get me.' When they opened the door, you could see the cop with the shotgun go in first and kneel in the living room. Then more cops ran in, about 6 with about 8 outside," unquote. He then said he heard 2 shots. When we asked if they thought the police acted in self-defense, he said, "I don't think so. They had riot shields, they overreacted." She said, "They should have done it a different way. If this is the way to evict people, it brings about chaos."
You were telling us just before that you walked by your mother's house and you saw police, but you didn't...
No.
Mary Bumpers is one of Eleanor Bumpers' 7 children. She lives in a basement apartment a few blocks away.
No information. Here go Detective that was there. He took me to the hospital. When I got there, she was DOA. Why? What is this 66-year-old woman doing DOA? When she woke up fine this morning, she suffers from heart trouble. She suffers from arthritis. There is nothing this woman could have done to anybody. If she had lied like they saying, that's a lie too. If she gonna throw it, when I saw my mother laying on the table, her hand is gone. What else was she supposed to throw?
I guess you can well imagine, with your experience on the force, the kind of talk that's going on in the Sedgwick houses right now.
Well, I certainly can imagine, and we have personnel from our community affairs units from both the Bronx and the precinct in the area trying to explain to the people what really happened there, to sort of give them the true story, because we know how rumors escalate into situations that are not true, so the facts, we are trying to disseminate the facts to the community over there, especially in that particular housing project.
For Channel 5 News, I'm Pablo Guzman.
An arson fire destroyed the Hamilton Hotel in Paterson, New Jersey, killing 15 people and injuring dozens more.
Last night's fire could only serve as a cruel reminder to many victims and Paterson officials that this hotel had been used to house people who lost homes due to fire.
It's been one of the hotels in the area that we were capable of using, who would in fact take in public welfare recipients and other destitute people who didn't have any place else to go.
And including people who had been burned out of their homes, is that right?
That is correct, sir. Yes.
The Alexander Hamilton Hotel, with its population of transients, could not be considered a luxury hotel. The deterioration began, people say, about 20 years ago. But Ernie Harrington, who was once the chef, can recall an earlier time of splendor.
It was a beautiful place, well acted and everything, you know. It was a real classy place. You had to be dressed to get in the place. You had to be dressed.
You had to get in, you had to have a suit and tie.
You had to have a tie and suit before you get into the dining room or any place.
Those days are gone for the Hamilton, and for these people, the hotel today was a last refuge. But last night's fire converted the sanctuary into a nightmare.
My one son is 26, and the one that's in the hospital now is 25, and he's pretty badly burnt. He wanted to be a dead hero, you know.
He was helping people?
Trying to.
We had to jump out the window because I couldn't get out through the door no fire escapes or nothing, so we had to jump.
And what floor were you on?
I was on the second.
And you jumped out the window?
Yeah. I had tie sheet to the, I climbed down to wait for my wife, so I figured I can break her fall some. But what happened with her, she didn't have the strength to hold her weight up, so she just, when she went to grab the sheet, she just came right down. And I couldn't stop her, so she broke her leg.
Like next week, like if they should come to you for something, then you would call their social worker and find out what funds.
These Red Cross workers were part of Patterson's emergency effort. Quarters were set up in the gym of JFK High School. But for some, like these friends of 83-year-old Willie Levine, who died in the blaze, it was all too late. Sam, let me ask you, how long had the man been living in the hotel?
I'd say about 10 years.
How long had you known him?
75 years. Ever since we were kids, we were brought up together.
Al, what happens to you now? Where do you go to live?
That's a good question. I don't know.
For Channel 5 News, I'm Pablo Guzman.
1984 was a presidential election year. Back then, it was Ronald Reagan versus Walter Mondale, and the polls showed one candidate firmly in the lead.
With a comfortable lead in all the polls, President Reagan returned to the White House after taking a couple of days off to enjoy the Indian summer weekend at Camp David. Polls give the president anywhere from a 12 to 19-point lead over Walter Mondale. But Reagan strategists say they're taking nothing for granted.
There are not a lot of things, I suppose, that we agree with the Mondale campaign about, but one thing we agree about is that polls don't vote, people vote, and it's up to us to turn out our vote. It doesn't do any good to have a lead in the polls if you don't turn your voters out.
Turnout is exactly what Walter Mondale is counting on, too. But as the underdog, he doesn't have the luxury of taking the weekend off. Mondale campaign chairman James Johnson says the strategy is still to discuss the issues, and Johnson denies reports he told Mondale that Reagan's lead is insurmountable.
And if we get the kind of turnout we need, and we get the response to these issues that we're getting now, I think we can do it.
The Reagan camp is spending much of its time these days trying to explain and diffuse comments made by Secretary of State George Shultz, who said last Thursday that retaliation against terrorists could cost military and civilian lives. Chief of Staff Baker says there's a danger that terrorists might try to strike before the election, but he hedges on the administration's response.
Well, the question of retaliation is something that we have considered in the past, and this is no secret. And it's something that I think we will be considering in the future, but there's no definite plan or contingency as of right now.
I think what they're trying to do now is to change the subject, try to appear to have a new approach in an area where they've failed.
The Mondale forces have tried to do a little subject changing of their own, saying they won't talk about polls anymore. They don't want the numbers to dampen the spirits of the big crowds that have been turning out in recent days to cheer Mondale on.
I'll tell you, there's an enthusiasm, a commitment, and an excitement in this country that those polls don't measure.
The Mondale forces have been buoyed by a welcome, if somewhat lukewarm, endorsement from the New York Times. The endorsement says that despite Mondale's flaws, he'd make a better, fairer president than Reagan. So Mondale plans a frenetic final 9 days, stumping the countryside. By contrast, a confident President Reagan plans to spend much of his time in the White House. Frank Sesno, Washington.
In the 1980s, New York City's subway system was in dire need of improvements. The MTA chairman and transit union leader butted heads and had differing opinions on what to do about it.
MTA chairman Robert Kiley and transit union leader John Law began their debate by agreeing on the rather obvious point that the subway system is in bad shape. The agreement ended there.
I'll be damned if I'm going to allow anybody, wherever they came from, north or south or midwest or wherever, to come in here and trample on our rights that it took us 50 years to establish.
There's no union busting going on here. As for telling it like it is, look, I'll tell you, I'll make the case for management busting.
John Law says the way to improve the transit system is to give workers the tools and equipment they need and let them do their jobs.
All we are saying to you and Dave and the other people, respect our people. You have a tremendous talent out there. They are anxious to work. We have to re-motivate them.
Kiley says one of the biggest problems is union rules that prevent managers from determining how best to deploy workers. He cited subway car cleaners as an example.
There are days when it rains, and there are days when it doesn't rain. When it rains, you might want to have more fellows picking up mops than you have brooms. We don't really have the right to do that right now. We don't have the right to give that kind of direction. That's absurd.
MTA officials also want to hire 1,200 non-union supervisors with the power to direct the union workers. But at least one person who heard the debate said he was unimpressed with both sides.
We're not going to sit by and pour $7 billion in the system and have raised taxes by $300 million a year and let these two yo-yos keep arguing the same points that I've argued for 3 years without a single answer.
Privately, some MTA board members say they too are tired of the union management debate and now want solutions to the larger problems plaguing the subway system. Ron Claiborne, Channel 5 News.
In 1984, the 15th annual New York City Marathon took place with nearly 20,000 runners.
A foggy, chilly day greeted 18,365 very excited, half-dressed bodies on the Staten Island side of the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. The 15th annual international run through the city was minutes away. A man who runs with a little style.
There you go.
Why?
A little pizzazz in it, that's all. It disappears after a while.
New York's been great. They've put on a fabulous marathon, organized from the time it started to right now.
It's the first time we come here. It's the first time we did the marathon from New York. It's fine.
Where are you from?
Switzerland, Italy.
As Mayor Koch greeted the competitors, he was showered with their warm-up outfits. Before the race, handicapped runners said that Koch promised to make their participation official next year.
If this is the best marathon in the world, this is the best organization, if this has the most money, then why can't this race be made accommodating to those who need wheelchairs for mobility purposes?
As the marathoners crossed the Verrazano, traffic stopped on the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway. As they made their way off the bridge and through Brooklyn's Bay Ridge section, the climate changed dramatically. So warm and sticky that the runners were clamoring for water only a few miles into the 26.2-mile race. It was, in fact, the warmest New York City Marathon in 15 years, in the mid-70s, with a 90% humidity at times, conditions which would later take their toll. Jacques Buzereau, a 48-year-old French runner, collapsed near the 59th Street Bridge in Queens and later died at Elmhurst Hospital, the first in the marathon's 15-year history. Nevertheless, most managed to finish the race, some under difficult circumstances, like Kittle Mo, who suffers from cystic fibrosis.
You look much stronger now than I've seen you. You look great.
Yes, I'm feeling much better now. What I feel is very hard in legs, you know.
Well, you're only a few blocks away from Central Park now, so you're doing great.
Yes.
Fifth Avenue in Harlem, nearing Central Park, Mo's close friend and 5-time marathon winner Greta Weitz showed the effects of some of the unseasonable weather as she led the field of women.
It would seem ironic that so many people are out here partying at 117th Street and Fifth Avenue, and there's so many athletes out here running in this stifling heat. But the people in the community say it's all about encouragement.
It's a good thing, and sometimes even the runners themselves, they give them a little initiative to keep going as they are running.
Nearing the home stretch in Central Park, it became apparent that the men's division would find 2 Italians finishing in the top 5. The first to cross the line, 26-year-old Orlando Pizzolato, who had to overcome stomach cramps and the extreme heat to win at 2 hours, 14 minutes, 53 seconds, the slowest New York Marathon win, but Pizzolato will accept that.
Also for me, it's very happy to run to win New York City Marathon because it's a very important marathon.
We've been here on Mulberry Street for quite a while, and we've discovered that a lot of people don't realize that Italy finished 1 in 5 of the marathon. How do you feel about that?
They're good athletes, aren't they? They're representative in things they do, so I don't see why it should be a surprise, you know.
Weitz added a 6th New York City Marathon win in 2 hours, 29 minutes, 30 seconds. Also plagued by cramps, she says she almost decided to quit early on. Each winner received $25,000 and a $23,000 Mercedes-Benz. Runners-up earned $22,000 and third-place finishers got $18,000. It was a race of records, the first fatality, the hottest conditions, and the first time that prize money was awarded openly. Chuck Curry, Channel 5 News.
And that was the news then.